Now we're moving on to operant conditioning. And y'all, operant conditioning deals with voluntary behavior. So you're making a decision to engage in a behavior. So some examples of that include training pigeons to peck at a certain shape, to train rats to push a lever, or even to train humans, because this is something that's going to be able to be applied not only to animals, but also to humans. So with operant conditioning, we're dealing with learning through consequence. And a lot of time we mistake consequence with having a negative connotation. A consequence is just an effect. There are always consequences for our behavior. Sometimes there's positive consequences, sometimes there's negative consequences. But according to the behaviorist approach of psychology, they believe that, like John Locke, we're all born with a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and that everything that we end up learning or we end up doing or becoming is based on our environment. They're not so much concerned with cognitive things. They're not so much concerned with the unconscious or the id or the superego. They're more concerned with what they can objectively measure. Since we can't study stream of consciousness, since we can't study introspection, instead, we need to focus on what we can see and measure and observe. B.F. Skinner is going to be one of the leaders of the behaviorist movement. And his name, B.F., that's just Burris Frederick. Interesting name, Burris. If you're looking for baby names, put that on your list. It's very unique. So he's the most significant name in behaviorism. And he wanted to study how behaviorism could be applied not only to animals, but to humans. And he studied this through the creation of his Skinner box, or operant chamber. So with operant conditioning, we're dealing with learning through consequences, and that's going to involve reinforcement and punishment. There's positive and negative reinforcement, and there's positive and negative punishment. Reinforcement is a reward. So what does it do to behavior?
Encourages it.
It encourages it. It increases it. What does punishment do to behavior?
Weakens it.
It weakens it, it decreases it, exactly right. That's one of the key issues that students get confused in their FRQs. They may be given an FRQ and they're asked to apply negative reinforcement, but instead of them talking about a reward through the subtraction of an aversive stimulus, they start talking like it's a punishment. Okay, and that's not going to get you the point. So make sure you know the difference between positive and negative. It doesn't mean good or bad. It means adding or subtracting. And the difference between reinforcement and punishment. One always increases a behavior and one always decreases a behavior. Okay, so here we have Skinner with his Skinner box or his operant chamber, basically to study animals and humans in order to see whether or not their behavior could be controlled or changed through a series of punishment or rewards. So with operant conditioning, you have two types of enforcing reinforcements or punishment. You can use fixed conditioning or varying conditioning. Fixed means that it's always the same amount, and that amount can either be the number of behaviors or rewards, which is known as ratio, the ratio schedule, or it can be based on time, the interval. So fixed is always the same. Varying means that it's a differing amount. So let's say that your parents came in and checked on you in your bedroom to see if you were studying, and they came in every 30 minutes on the dot. Is that fixed or varying? That's fixed. Good. I saw how Young say it. What about ratio or interval? Which schedule is it? If they come in every 30 minutes, is it the number of times or the amount of time?
Interval.
It's interval, the amount of time. They're coming in every 30 minutes. But let's say that they mixed it up. They come and check on you every 5 minutes, then it goes to 8 minutes, then it goes to an hour, then it goes down to 20 minutes. Then you're less likely to learn that schedule, and so you're more likely to continue studying because you never know when they're going to pop in, kind of like a pop quiz. So you have fixed interval and varying interval, and you have fixed ratio and varying ratio. And we're going to go through examples of that. But first, before we do that, I wanted to go through this video. We watched the show The Office to look at classical conditioning. Now we're going to look at an example from The Big Bang Theory for operant conditioning. So, with this, it's important to note that operant conditioning deals with voluntary behavior. Now, they do make a mistake in this video. They confuse negative reinforcement with punishment. So, whenever you hear them say negative reinforcement, just switch it with punishment because they make the same mistake that most AP students make on this exam.
Are you finished?
Well, thank you. How thoughtful. Would you like a chocolate?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Sheldon. I almost sat in your spot.
Did you? I didn't notice. Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh, hey, Kim. Yeah, you know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never guess who they got to replace you with.
Okay. I know what you're doing.
Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
No, I don't want it. Sheldon, you can't train my girlfriend like a lab rat.
Actually, it turns out I can.
Well, you shouldn't.
There's just no pleasing you, is there, Leonard? You weren't happy with my previous approach to dealing with her, so I decided to employ operant conditioning techniques, building on the works of Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. Yet by this time next week, I believe I can have her jumping out of a pool, balancing a beach ball on her nose.
No, this has to stop now.
I'm not suggesting we really make her jump out of a pool. I thought the bazinga was implied. I'm just tweaking her personality, just sanding off the rough edges, if you will.
No, you're not sanding Penny.
Are you saying that I am forbidden from applying a harmless, scientifically valid protocol that will make our lives better?
Yes, you're forbidden.
Bad, Leonard. You know, using positive reinforcement techniques, I could train that behavior out of her in a week.
No.
If you let me use negative reinforcement, I can get done before we go to bed.
You're not squirting her in the face with water.
No, of course not. We're talking very mild electric shocks. No tissue damage whatsoever.
Forget it.
You mean like that high-pitched, irritating laugh?
Yes.
You wouldn't prefer a throaty chuckle?
You're not changing how Penny laughs.
No, that would be incongruous. I was going to lower the whole voice to a more pleasing register.
Sorry, guys. That girl is freaky.
Come again?
Freaky.
Freaky?
Yeah, freaky.
Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to make some warm milk and then turn in. I trust if you two are planning on engaging in amorous activities, you'll keep the decibel level to a minimum.
Of course.
Thank you.
These are so good.
Unbelievable.
What?
I was just thinking we should probably turn into...
Well, my new bed got delivered. If you come over and put it together, you can stay at my place.
Really? That's a lot of work and it's kind of late.
Yeah, but if we stay there, we won't have to be quiet.
Let's go.
Interesting. Sex works even better than chocolate to modify behavior. I wonder if anyone else has stumbled onto that.
Like with our quiz that we did at the beginning of this lecture, we're going to create another one of those graphs that helps us determine the difference between positive and negative and reinforcement and punishment. So you already have this graph from that quiz. Remember that with positive, it's adding a stimulus, and with negative, it's subtracting a stimulus. Now, if it's a desired stimulus, it's reinforcement. If it is taking away a desired stimulus, it's punishment. If it is providing a aversive stimulus, it's punishment. And if it's taking away an aversive stimulus, then it's reinforcement. Okay, so make sure that you keep that straight. This is one of those things that I use, like if you're writing an FRQ, create that chart so you can delineate the definition before you move on to applying it. Okay? Remember that with reinforcement, it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, it is going to increase a particular behavior. One example of negative reinforcement, because that's one of the harder ones for people to come up with, like positive reinforcement, it's easy. You get something you want in response to your behavior. That could be money, it can be food, it could be cats, whatever. But negative reinforcement is a lot more difficult for people to come up with an example. So I have an example here on the slide. What happens when you get into your car and you don't buckle your seatbelt? What happens?
Yelled at.
Yeah, because you're not driving alone. So you get yelled at, or the car yells at you. All right, the car will beep at you. And is that a fun sound? Does that beeping slap? No. So that sound is something that's very annoying and irritating. You want it to go away. Okay, it's not like, oh, drop a beep, right? And so how do you get that beeping to go away? What behavior do you have to do?
Put your seatbelt on.
Put your seatbelt on, exactly right. So with this, it's negative reinforcement because you're getting rewarded. When you buckle your seatbelt, the beeping stops. An aversive stimulus has been removed from your environment. So positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement encourages behavior by a reward. So positive reinforcement could include, like in this picture, you get a high five, or you get praise from your teacher, or you get an A on your assignment, right? That's positive reinforcement. That's going to encourage the behavior that earned that reward in the first place. Negative reinforcement also acts as a reward because it removes something that is aversive. Okay, so again, like in all caps on this slide, you need to make sure in your notes that negative reinforcement is not the same as punishment. An example of negative reinforcement that y'all may be familiar with other than driving is whenever you have a headache, what behavior do you do in order to get rid of that pain?
Drink water.
Okay, so you could be dehydrated, or like Tucker said, pills. Okay, so ibuprofen or aspirin. So when you get a headache, you turn to medication. And when you take that medication, the pain goes away. That's going to increase your behavior of taking medicine. A punishment version of that would be, what if you get really sick and you take a cough medicine that tastes awful? You don't want that cough medicine. And so since it adds an aversive stimulus, that would be a punishment, because if you don't like the taste of the medicine, then you're not likely to actually take it when you need it. But with negative reinforcement, with, say, pain medication, it takes away the aversive stimulus of that pain. And so that's going to increase your likelihood of taking that medication. Punishment, in contrast, decreases a behavior. It discourages a behavior through aversive stimulus. So you have two types, negative punishment and positive punishment. Negative punishment is when you take away something you want. Positive punishment is when you add something you don't want. So what would be an example of negative punishment? What do your parents do to punish you with negative punishment? The room? Okay, so what? Do they make you sleep on the porch? Or what about when parents take away the door? Any of y'all had that, or you've heard of that, where parents have taken away their, y'all are not getting locked in the basement. So they take away their child's door, so taking away their privacy. There have been some examples where parents have cut their children's hair as a negative punishment, taking away their identity. Now that's pretty extreme, right? You come near me with a pair of scissors cutting my hair, you're getting decked. So those types of negative punishments can be very detrimental to someone's self-esteem and to their identity, but it is effective in decreasing an undesired behavior. Positive punishment is when you add something that's not liked. So whereas negative punishment, you take away the door, or you take away the cell phone, or you take away someone's hair. With things like corporal punishment, like we talked about with spanking, Vegetables could be positive punishment as well. Okay, so which one is more effective? The more effective form of operant conditioning is going to be reinforcement. It's always better to reinforce rather than it is to punish, because one of the things about humans is that we get really good at avoiding punishment. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we learn the lesson. It's more so that we just learn how not to get caught. Okay, so another thing is that reinforcement and punishment are most effective when the consequence immediately follows the behavior and is applied consistently. Let's say, for instance, you have a puppy and you're trying to potty train that puppy. Well, when that puppy goes TT on the carpet, you know that you need to grab them immediately, put their nose in it, and spray them with a water bottle or whatever it is that you do to punish your animals, right? But what happens if you get home and you find that the puppy had TT'd on the carpet, but the TT's cold? That could have happened in the morning. You're getting home in the evening. Does it make any sense to take that dog and stick its nose in the pee puddle hours after it peed? No, because it's not going to know what you're trying to send as a message. It doesn't think like humans do. It's not going to be able to say, I shouldn't pee on the carpet. It's going to start associating you coming home with punishment. So instead of teaching your dog to not pee on the carpet, instead you teach your dog to run away from you when you get home because it knows, I'm going to be punished for whatever. Now with humans, we're a little bit better at logical thinking. And so even if you don't get caught immediately with a behavior, you can still get a punishment later after the initial behavior, and it's still effective as a form of operant conditioning. But it's better to have it follow immediately and to apply it consistently. So every time you do the negative behavior, to be punished for it, or every time you do the positive behavior, you get rewarded for it. But if you have to pick one or the other, reinforcement or punishment, reinforcement is always more effective. Now, when we talk about reinforcers, we're talking about the things that increase or decrease behavior. And reinforcers in particular are going to fall into one of two categories. They can either be primary reinforcers or conditioned reinforcers. Primary reinforcers are the kind that are innately satisfying. So food and water, those are things that are innately satisfying. You don't have to learn that they are reinforcing. Whereas conditioned reinforcers are satisfying because they're associated with a primary reinforcer. They are learned. So for instance, money is a conditioned reinforcer because money is not innately valuable. Y'all, we make up money. The only thing that makes it valuable is that we all agree that you can exchange it for goods and services. But if there were a zombie apocalypse and the government shut down and all of that, water would be a much better resource. Food would be a heightened resource. You wouldn't be able to go around and flash dollar bills and say, I want to get a carton of water. It wouldn't be able to work like that. So we associate money as being a reinforcer that influences our behavior because of what we can do with that money. We can exchange it for goods and services. So food, water, sex because of its association with dopamine receptors, affiliation, we are social creatures, we're like pack animals, so we have those relationships with others, and the removal of pain. All of that is primary, all of that is innate, but we associate them with other things that become reinforcers. Okay, so like your favorite food, that is a learned reinforcer. Soda is a conditioned reinforcer. Birthday party or Thanksgiving, and Advil and Tylenol. Okay, we take it when we're in pain rather than taking Smarties or sour gummies, right? Because we associate it with the removal of pain. All right, so now we're going to do a little example where you're going to take positive and negative reinforcement and punishment, and you're going to apply it to this scenario. So you need to use the term positive reinforcement and define it. Then you need to apply it to this scenario. Now, this scenario is a little girl screaming when she's put in a grocery shopping cart, and her father wants to increase the behavior of her sitting quietly and decrease the behavior of her screaming and crying. Now, not all of the information is provided here. If you want to add things to the scenario that aren't inherently listed, like you're in a grocery store, is there anything in the grocery store that can be used in this application? But make sure that you're explicit in your application because otherwise you won't get the point. So let's start with positive reinforcement. Go ahead and in the chat, Give a definition for positive reinforcement. Okay, so adding a stimulus to increase the desired behavior. All right, so make sure that you use the terms and make sure it's a complete sentence. So positive reinforcement is a type of operant conditioning in which a stimulus is added to increase a desired behavior. That would be a good definition. Now, Gavin, you went ahead and you did the application. Okay, but that's still fine. So what is the positive reinforcement? You're adding the desired stimulus of candy in order to increase what behavior? Sitting in the cart quietly. Okay, so do you see how that application was applied? Now let's do negative reinforcement. What's the definition for negative reinforcement? Right, negative reinforcement is a form of operant conditioning in which an undesired stimulus is taken away to increase a certain behavior. All right, good. And Itzel as well. When a stimulus is subtracted to increase a behavior. All of y'all are exactly right, specifically when you mentioned the removal of an undesirable stimulus. So what is an example of negative reinforcement that can be applied to this scenario? What undesirable stimulus could be taken away to convince the girl to shut the heck up? Remove her from the shopping cart. Okay, if the shopping cart is what's making her freak out, then maybe you remove her from the shopping cart because she wants to walk alongside with you, or she thinks she's too grown for the grocery cart. We don't know how old this girl is. Maybe she's embarrassed. Maybe she's 12 years old and her dad put her in the cart. Her dad might offer to take away her chores if she's quiet. Good, that's another thing. Like, I will take away you having to clean the litter box if you'll sit quietly for this entire grocery trip. Okay, remember, reinforcement is not a punishment. This is a reward. Okay, now let's move on to positive punishment. What is the definition for positive punishment? Positive punishment is a type of operant conditioning in which an undesirable stimulus is added to discourage behavior. Exactly right. So what could be added to this scenario that the little girl would not want in order to decrease her crying? Have y'all ever heard your parents say, oh, you're going to cry? I'm going to give you something to cry about. It's like, I'm already crying. I don't need anything else. The dad could scream back, okay? So if your kid is crying, you just cry louder. You're like, oh, now it's a competition. We'll see who can last longer. I'll tell you that the kid's probably going to last longer. Kids are spiteful and they have way too much energy. Although I'm just internally screaming for most of my time. Falcon punch. All right, so corporal punishment. Let's not get over into abuse. I'm pretty sure punching your child is a no-no, although I don't have kids, so don't ask me. She could be grounded. Okay, but that's where it gets weird between negative and positive punishment, because if you're grounding, what makes grounding so undesirable? When you're grounded, things are taken away. You get TV time taken away. You get your phone taken away. You get your time with friends taken away. So being grounded might be a better example for negative punishment because it's the taking away of something in order to decrease the crime. So let's save that one for negative punishment. So positive punishment would be yelling, or it could be corporal punishment. What about negative punishment? Spencer already gave us an example of it, but what's the definition for negative punishment? Negative punishment is a form of operant conditioning in which a desired stimulus is taken away to decrease a certain behavior. Excellent. So you say what is added or subtracted, specifically an undesirable stimulus, and you also say its effect on behavior. If you had just said negative punishment is a form of operant conditioning in which a desired stimulus is taken away, but you don't talk about its effect on behavior, then that wouldn't be a good enough definition. You have to actually say, does it increase or decrease the behavior? And like Spencer said, grounding would be an example of that because you're taking away something you want, like your phone or your TV time.